Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Ursula Pike. Again, I'm the Associate Director of the Digital Higher Ed Consortium of Texas. It's been a really amazing, thought-provoking, interesting day. All these sessions, I've learned so much. And right now, we're going to have a wrap-up session. We're going to talk with Dr. Bethany Simunich. She is the Director of Research and Innovation at Quality Matters. And in this role, Dr. Simunich leads efforts to help institutions, faculty, and staff make data-driven, research-based decisions to implement online quality assurance and promote online student success. Dr. Simunich has worked in higher education for over 20 years, focusing on online learning for a majority of that time, including as an online instructor, instructional designer, distance learning administrator, and researcher. And Dr. Simunich earned her doctoral degree from the Ohio State University and 2 master's degrees from the University of Pittsburgh. Before we get started, I want to remind folks, I forgot to say that we do have captioning, live captioning. If you click on the very bottom row of the Zoom of your platform window, you should be able to see the captioning button there, double 2 C's. So with that, this session is really a conversation, and I have some questions, but if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. And I will share them with Bethany. Also, we can you can unmute yourself, but first, I just wanted to give you a chance to, Bethany, to say anything that you had to say generally about QM and the work that you do.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with all of you. And it has been such an amazing day. So I was telling Ursula before the session that I had the chance to attend several of the presentations. They were all so good. I am so impressed with the conference that y'all put together today. Before I came to QM, I was co-state lead for the Ohio State Consortium for QM, and one year my institution hosted the annual member meeting for Ohio, and it was so much work. So from that day forward, I have such respect for people that put together conferences, and today was seamless. So the fact that it was virtual and the technology was added in, just, kudos to all of you. Really appreciate being here today. So a little bit about research and QM. QM does a lot of things with research. And I think when people first think about research in QM, your mind maybe immediately goes to the research behind the rubric. And that is one of the things that we do. So if you do not already know this, QM has a publicly available database. It's called the QM Research Library. It's linked on the QM website. And that is a searchable database. So any of you that are doing research in online learning, or if you know graduate students that are doing research in online learning, it's a great, like I said, public free resource. And you can pull up the annotations and the information for a lot of the research that is behind the rubric and that supports the rubric. So I specifically said a lot of the research and not all of the research, because there's also information in there for things that are not in the rubric, such as information on online teaching and related topics that are beyond the scope of online design. So that is one of the things that QM Research does. We continue to scour the latest online learning research and utilize that to help support the rubric and the other resources that we provide. So we're doing the rubric revision right now. If you're not aware, we have started on that. Brenda Boyd and myself are the co-chairs, and we have 16 amazing people from the QM community that are working on the revision this time. And so research is one of the fundamental things that goes into that. So we try to inform the community of the latest online learning research, but we also conduct research, and that's me working in collaboration with other researchers. It's also, in some cases, researchers from the community that reach out to us, and they have a topic that they want to research, or they have research that they want to write up and would be really pertinent to the community. So some of that comes out in the form of QM white papers. We recently released one that was co-authored by Dr. Brooks, who I know was your keynote this morning, on inclusive design. So if you have not seen that, that's also on our website. It's a really wonderful paper to check out. So we have that. We also do the Chloe report. So I'm also co-director of the Chloe report. If you're not familiar with that, Chloe stands for the Changing Landscape of Online Education. And it's a unique report in online higher ed because it presents the perspective and the opinions of chief online officers. So very rarely do chief online officers go by that title, but this would be the person at your institution who's essentially in charge of online learning. And we ask them things like, what are they doing for faculty development for online, for student online support, looking at enrollment projections, all those types of things. So that's just like the top 3 things, maybe off the top of my head, that QM Research does, but we do a whole host of things. So if you have any questions related to that, please do type them in the chat. I'm ready to answer anything. I'm hoping somebody's going to put me on the hot seat even, and I'll get a tough question. So we'll see.
And what do you think are the goals for your department? Is it just to get more folks looking at using your research, or maybe to do new types of research?
That's a very good question. One of the main goals is to better assist institutions and individuals in doing research that is going to help support better and higher quality online learning. So those are 2 very different needs. When you're looking at institutional needs for data and research, you're looking at institutional questions like, we want to examine the courses at our institution that have high DFW, drop, fail, withdraw rates, and kind of see what's going on in those online courses so that we could better help those students. That would be one example of a research question that's really at that institutional level. But then you also have individual faculty, instructional designers, and other DL related staff, and they want to do their own research. So individuals might be doing full-fledged publishable quantitative research, but there's also these really good opportunities for SOTL research, scholarship of teaching and learning, action research. So other things that even individual faculty can do. And an example of that research question might be, I just made some changes in my course, or I intend to revise my online course in order to, meet more QM standards, for example. And I want to know if this has a positive effect on my students, right? So this is a very common question, but normally I get this question after the revision has been done. So this is one example that I give at every talk or every opportunity because I'm trying to get this message out there. This is a very common, what we call a before and after type of study, right? Every faculty or ID wants an answer to that question. Did the improvements that I make to the course, did it have any effect for my students? Are they learning better? Are they more satisfied? Do they have higher self-efficacy? Have the changes I've made in my teaching even have that, it encouraged a greater motivation for my students to engage? So those are all types of really good SOTL type of questions that can be answered, but you need the picture of the before, right? So if you're making changes to your course and you know that you want to investigate whether or not those changes made a difference, or what difference those changes made, you first have to get that full picture of before. And that means looking at your course as it is now, looking at the student participation in the course, the learning. Most often the quickest route to that, even though it doesn't encompass all of learning, is grades, but looking at student grades. You might have student evaluations of instruction. You might have individual feedback surveys in your courses, student satisfaction ratings, all of those things to help you paint a picture of what is going on in your course right now, and maybe highlight some of the design issues even for your course, or even some issues that you might be able to move the needle on, with your own teaching. So then when you make the changes, there's this whole interim period where you need to document every change that you're making so that when you get that after picture, right, and you look at the same metrics, you have the same data like student grade, satisfaction, let's just go, with those for sake of the example. And let's say you do see a change, you want to know why. And that's when you look at the specific changes that were made, right? So that's an example of a SOTL type of project that even individual faculty can do, but get that full picture before you embark on it.
Oh, that is a great point. And as a former grant writer, I know that challenge exists, where you want to make a change, but you have to document that change. And, that reminds me of an issue. I know in the past that I have said, what kind of data do we have on QM's impact on student outcomes disaggregated by gender or ethnicity? And you have pointed out to me that although QM has data on faculty who have completed certain number of trainings or course reviews, all that student data that is housed in in each institution's organization. And that's not something that you would be able to, you can provide guidance maybe, but that data is outside your realm.
Right, you're exactly right. So, I mean, probably the most common question that QM gets, whether I get it personally or it's sent to QM in general, is tell me QM makes a difference. Tell me that QM, has this big impact on students. And as you said, we do have studies for that. It is written up in a report that actually we're revising now. So the former director of research, Dr. Kay Shattuck at QM, she had authored a report about the impact of quality matters, and she's been revising that. It has been a work in progress, a labor of love, I'm going to call it, for almost 2 years now. So she scours every dissertation, everything written about QM, every piece of research done on QM. And, some of the research done is really great. Some of it really suffers from design issues. So regardless of how, the QM course fares in that, it's difficult for us to talk about if it's not designed well and there's all these confounding variables, right? So that's another difference. There's good research and there's research that's very difficult to talk about, because maybe it wasn't designed especially well. But the big answer to the question of what is the impact of QM is always, I would love to explore that with you. Have you collected the data, right? So if you're interested in that, I urge you to collect that data, or at least start down that process, whether it's individually for your course or looking at it in a larger scale, a more macro view for your institution. We're also trying to encourage institutions to work more closely with any offices that they might have for institutional research. A lot of the data that you need is going to be housed there, but QM has no student data. There is no possible way that QM as an organization could say, here's the impact of QM on students. That all has to be partnered work with institutions or individuals. So again, if that is something that you're interested in, please do reach out to us at research@qualitymatters.org. We also have a research group on LinkedIn where anybody that's sort of interested in that type of research, sometimes we gather. But yes, that question involves you to get to the answer.
That's a great point. That's a great point. There is a question in the chat.
Good.
Judith Sebesta asks, what changes, if any, would you like or love to see regarding data on quote unquote distance education or online learning that's available through IPEDs?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, that can get a little bit messy. First and foremost, I would love it if all institutions had to report their online enrollment to IPEDs. So that is one barrier. So just as one example, when we look at the data for the Chloe report, we have the general sample, but then we also break it down by institutional type and we look at the responses that way. And then additionally, we break it down by levels of online enrollment and we look at it that way. Not all the institutions that respond to the Chloe survey, though, report their online enrollment levels to IPEDs. And so there is a much smaller sample that we have to look at then when we break it down by levels of online enrollment. Additionally, IPEDS data, and I think this is why we're still working with 2019 data, and I'm even hesitant, even if 2020 data came out, to work with that, because the pandemic started, these several years of conflating remote courses with online courses. So you may have institutions saying we are reporting this for online enrollment or distance education enrollment, and it's really a remote course. And so we have to be very careful with that, because we don't want to use that data and falsely signal that there's this huge upswing in online enrollment when that may not be the case. Everybody was remote learning. Well, mostly everybody was remote learning at some point, especially during that initial shift around spring, summer 2020. And some institutions really did think of that as purely online learning, which is not the case. So I think IPEDs is going to be a little bit messy for the near future.
Yes, yes. Well, that's good. That's good to point that out. I hadn't really thought about that. That's true. One thing I wanted to ask about, one great resource that just in the last year has become available is this QMC data dashboard in MyQM. And I have found that really helpful. And for example, this morning, the presentation, the state of the Texas Consortium report, it's really easy to pull that data now. And I guess I just want to encourage institutions or members to use it. And have you seen any interesting ways that people are using that data, or I guess I just kind of want to say thanks for that. And and if you have any suggestions for using that data, that would be great.
Yeah, very, very good question. And this is something I do have a handout on. So Ursula, I will send that to you so that you can share that with attendees in a way that makes sense after the event. That was a wonderful addition. And part of the discussion for that came about because when I was a QMC, I really wanted a data dashboard. So anybody that has been in that QMC role, a lot of us have to create sort of end of the year charts, for our provost, for example, and they want to see, well, how many of our faculty participated in PD, or how are we faring with course reviews, and all that sort of thing. So the data dashboards make that easy for you to do. What the data dashboard allows the QMC to do, and you can do this at the institutional level if you're an institutional QMC, but if you are a member of a system, there's also a system view for QMCs that are leads in a system, right? So there's two views that some of you will have access to. But you can look at your professional development involvement at your institution or within a system. You could look at your course reviews, and there's a bunch of filtering options. So you could filter by the dates, you could filter by like type of workshop, etc. And it spits out a really nice graph for you so that you don't have to do a lot of this work manually, which is what we had to do before. And there were times where I was, knee deep in the QM Excel spreadsheets and near tears. So hopefully this makes it easier. In terms of use, I've heard a lot of QMCs say that they're using this for like end of year reports. They're also using it, to really help to figure out their budgets for the coming year. So for example, you could look at QM involvement or course review involvement and look at that in conjunction with maybe your institutional strategic plan or your implementation plan for QM, so that you kind of are able to map things out on a timeline that works for you in your institutional budget. So some of those graphs can help with that thinking as well. I also think that they're pretty easily understood graphs, so that when, especially again for the QMCs, when you're making presentations maybe to your internal or external stakeholders who are not the online learning practitioners at your institution, and maybe they just don't have the same knowledge base as you, this can kind of help you have that discussion in a way that provides you with some visuals as well. I think just in general, it's a good way to kind of take the temperature at your institution. What is the level of involvement by your faculty in workshops, for example? Has that changed appreciably over time? So because you're able to set the start and the end dates, you can get a longitudinal picture of involvement. Did things ramp up during the pandemic? Are they slowing down now? That's a very typical picture to see, but it can kind of help you make the case maybe for future needs as well.
Oh, those are all great points. I hadn't even thought about the budget implications, but that's really a good resource for that. I just want to ask, what challenges do you see members encounter connected to research or doing more innovative projects? Is there something that stands out, finances or having other resources?
Mhm. In in terms of research, I would say the biggest issue and barrier is you don't know what you don't know. So in a previous life, I was not in online learning. I was in communication. And when I did research as a communication professor, I felt it was a lot easier. You had terms that were fairly well defined. Um, you didn't have as many confounding variables to deal with. And then when I got into online learning, I realized this is a distinctly different type of research that is unique and it is more complex in many ways. So you have confounding variables that you need to deal with. And let me just give you one example so it kind of makes more sense what I'm talking about. So let's say that I am a faculty member and I'm redesigning my course and I want to, it's the common question. I want to know that this is going to make a positive difference for my students. Okay. So I look at the course and I make some changes. And then next time it's taught, let's say that it is taught by my colleague the next time instead of me. Okay. So right now I have another variable I have to contend with. I have a different instructor. Okay. If I'm trying to compare two courses and I'm just comparing the design of them, I need to hold things constant like teaching, right? And if it cannot be the same instructor, I need to have other things that will help me attend to that confounding variable of the impact of delivery. So that might be, okay, I have two different instructors, and that's a situation that I need to deal with right now, but they both had the same faculty development and they have both taught online for, let's say, 5 to 7 years, right? So that paints a portrait of them as they've had some training, they have been teaching online for a while, they have that knowledge level, and that at least is some level of control for that confounding variable. So if you're familiar with that online quality pie that QM talks about, where you see that design is a factor in online student success, but also delivery, also the content that you include in your course, student supports, all of those things then are confounding variables. So I cannot make a change to the design and then see what the result is, the impact is on students, and attribute that change solely to the design, unless I have dealt with these confounding variables of teaching and how that affected student success, additional types of student supports, all those, other types of things. So I think that is one of the biggest barriers that a lot of times I see individuals with the very best intentions embarking on online learning research, but they're not aware of the unique aspects of online learning research or these confounding variables. So we do have a publicly available free research toolkit we developed a couple years ago, and it kind of walks you through the process of designing a good online learning research project, and it will, attend to some of these confounding variables. We also have an online workshop, Designing Quality Online Learning Research. So if you have an idea for research and you're thinking, look, this is not my field, but I have a great idea, or I want to do a solo project for my own course, I'm not quite sure how to approach it because I'm not in online learning, or I've never done education research before, that workshop might be a good fit for you. But sometimes it can be very difficult for faculty who are in their own specific disciplines to then carry out DL research and have it, have the highest level of validity and reliability that you can have because of these confounding variables. So I would say that is probably the biggest issue. In the institutional side, I would say the biggest issue is, simply really not thinking about the metrics that you want to collect data on and collecting that data so that you can evaluate the efficacy of your quality assurance efforts. So as one example, if you want to look at DFW rates and they're affected, or student grades or whatnot, are you looking at that as an institutional level for your online courses and programs? And are you attending to the confounding variables when you go to interpret that data, right? So you have confounding variables that you need to deal with, regardless of whether you're an institution or an individual faculty, but you also just really need to decide what that research question is. And then especially for institutions, really look at whether or not you're collecting the data that you need to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are all great points. We're getting close to the end of this time together for this conversation, I wanted to open it up and make sure that if anybody had any additional questions, that they had a chance to answer them. And then also, Bethany, if there was anything that you wanted to add.
I don't think so. I have talked a lot.
Oh,
Um,
it's been great, really, really
But also,
informative.
if you have any general QM questions too, and you thought, hey, well, I have somebody from QM here on the line, you are free to ask that. And as I told Ursula, if I don't know the answer, I will take it back to QM staff and I will try to get the answer. So whether it's about research or something else, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or anything that might help.
And I'm not seeing any. Does anybody have anything? If not, you are welcome to forward those questions to me later, and I can get them to Bethany. I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me about data. I really always enjoy your presentations on the reports. It makes me think about the possibilities of QM and of the research that can be done to show impact, but just also all the work. And this conversation has been great. It's shone a light on some of the aspects of that research that I hadn't even considered.
Yeah, and again, thank you for having me and for this great conversation. And I'm gonna, leave you with one tip because I just thought about this now. Even if you're not ready to do research, you can still collect data, even just feedback data. So as an example, we did the executive briefing this week for the Chloe report for the COOs that filled it out. And one of the data points that we were talking about was online student orientations. And we haven't seen an uptick in institutions requiring that, right? And so we asked the COOs, why aren't we seeing this as being required? Because we saw during the pandemic that a lot of students who were campus-based students that had to switch this remote learning and they were unprepared. They didn't, have any exposure to online learning prior to this. So why wouldn't this be required now moving forward? So the COOs told us about, some reasons that it might not be required. But then one COO said, well, ours is optional, but do you know how we got increased participation in it? We started to collect student data. We collected feedback from students who completed the course, and again, it was optional. And we also followed those students and looked at the grades that they got in their first online course after completing the orientation, and then the grades that students got in an online course who hadn't completed the orientation. And they found a 7% increase in student grades after the ones that had completed the orientation. And that is just using data wisely. That's, running some basic statistics and using that feedback in order to get better participation in something that's going to help students. So data does not always have to mean I'm doing this huge quantitative research project and it's going to be published and it's going to take me a year to do it. I need IRB approval. There are other ways to be involved in research and data collection. You can apply the same thing to any faculty development type of workshops that you're doing. Collect feedback from those faculty, get those quotes, get their, the success rate, ask if they have an increase in self-efficacy for designing or teaching online courses, and then use that, share that with their peers and see if you don't get increased participation.
That's a great point. Thank you for that. I think that's a great way to end the conversation. And now I would really love to remind everyone or invite everyone who, if they haven't already, to tell us where you are. I created this Padlet with which you should be able to add your address to just by either scanning this QR code, or you can go to padlet.com/upike/TxQMC 2020 and tell us where you are. And let me go to that Padlet. And see where people are. We have people all across the state who are working with QM, big colleges, small colleges, multi-campus institutions, individual campus institutions, and look, there you are, Bethany, up there.
I just
in
added Ohio. Yeah.
Yes. And I really just think that it's been really great to work with all of you, both for the conference today, but then also just throughout the consortium, because you all bring different needs and you all bring different solutions to the work that you're doing. But at this point, I just wanted to open it up, and if anybody wants to share something that they took away from today, something that they learned today, and you're welcome to unmute yourself or let me stop sharing this. Just let me know what was something that you've taken away from today's presentations. I know for me, I just love what Dr. Brooks said about connecting professional development to infrastructure. Anybody else?
Ursula, I'll share one impression I've had. How lucky are our students to have these incredible professionals who are working for them, advocating for them, innovating for them. I'm just so inspired. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, and in the chat here, Heather Walker said, I really appreciate Dr. Laird's presentation on backward course design. If I'd had an instructional designer like her to work with when I was teaching, I think it would have really made a difference. Linda Reed said, I like the information on how to do the before and after data collection for teachers. This is so often a question from faculty. One thing I also was impressed by is how many people talked about the need to evolve. Dr. Brooks talked about it in her keynote, but then several other presentations talked about being flexible, not just during the session, not just during the pandemic, but just in general, as an instructional designer, instructional technologist, as a faculty, you have to be willing to evolve and pay attention to what's going on, what the needs are on your campus. So that campus informed effort, I just think that's a great concept. Amy Gates says, I just really appreciate hearing from others in building a good community of practice for online learner support. and Judith, you said, I think the word data scares people, but as Bethany stated, anyone can collect it and probably should. Yes, that is right. Well, I really have enjoyed today. I just think it was a great first inaugural TxQMC conference. I know that years past, TxQMC would meet occasionally at other conferences that were happening. But since we're all spread out throughout the state, I think that this virtual option actually makes is a better option for our institutions. And so I really hope that going forward, we can do this again, which reminds me, Heather, I don't know if you want to talk about the survey, but I know that there is a post-conference survey that will be sent to all attendees. And we ask that you fill it out and give us some feedback so we can figure out what we can do next time and what we can improve on, what we should keep. And Heather, will they be getting that in an email? Yes, please watch for an email with a post-conference survey coming soon. Probably after Monday. We're taking Monday off, but then after that, we'll be working on it. And again, that email will let you know. We'll have links to we'll tell you when you can watch the recordings and see anything that you missed. Yes. So glad everybody's saying great things in the chat. Great conference, very insightful, learned so much. All right, well, have a great weekend, everyone. And I hope you have a great summer. And if you have any follow-up questions, please email me. I will be happy to answer them. And if I can't, get in touch with those who have it. Was there something you want to say, Bethany?
Nope, I was just going to say thank you again. This has just been an amazing day. Just big kudos all around for everybody that was involved in putting this together, and all the speakers and great presentations. Just so impressive. Y'all did a great job, and thank you for having me. I appreciate joining you today and having this conversation. Really, thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Have a great weekend, everyone.